Hey everybody, welcome back to Axis Cinema Appreciation. This is a spin-off of the Let's Talk Movies podcast with John and David. I am John, that is David, and today here on the channel, we're going back to the very beginning of our friendship, I'll call it, since now I think that David and I are friends, but we used to just be people who just chatted together on YouTube back in the day, and back then I was doing a show with my cousin Matt. And unfortunately, he didn't want to talk James Bond anymore. And I wanted to continue talking Bond. And David over here offered to throw his hat in the ring and say, "Hey, I'll step in. I'll take the second chair and I'll talk some James Bond with you." And that's eventually what led to the entire Let's Talk Movies podcast with John and David. But we're going back to the roots today. We're just going to discuss the franchise as a whole, right, David?
Yeah, John, that's right. I threw my hat in the ring just like Bond throws his hat onto the coat stand. As you know, you were like Miss Moneypenny watching it just land.
And I was just amazed, like, "Oh my God, look what I found!"
And you turned around to me, shamrock balls. Yeah, that's right, mate. As I say, this is where it all began for us. As we recently have just released For Your Eyes Only. So if anybody hasn't checked that episode out on the Let's Talk Movie podcast, check it out. And I did mention on that this is where it all kind of began, and we make it a yearly thing now, an annual thing to revisit Bond, to do the next installment in the Bond franchise, and of course, since we've started this new what would you say, series on the channel, Axis Cinema Appreciation, it gives us the opportunity to just talk about how much we just love the franchise as a whole, and not just specifically about one movie. And unfortunately, we haven't done the Sean Connery movies, and well, we've done one Sean Connery movie, but we haven't been back. We haven't done it from the start. We didn't start at Dr. No because you were doing them with Matt, and one day I'm hope we'll get there. But in the meantime, we'll be able to touch on those movies today.
Yeah, we'll finally actually get to have a nice little Sean Connery conversation, and we'll discuss all of the James Bonds here today, and discuss the franchise for what it is and why we truly do love it. That's why it's called Cinema Appreciation, because I mean, this for me, when I stack all my favorite franchises, I think I'd probably still put the James Bond franchise at number one. I get excited for a new installment every time they come around. For me, I know I've said this before, but in this kind of show, it has to be repeated. I found James Bond in general. First I knew about the GoldenEye video game, so because I was a big video game player when I was a kid. But when I really finally started watching them was in marathons. Back in the day before we had all these streaming services. You just you didn't have as many entertainment options. And around Thanksgiving here in the United States, they would always put on the James Bond marathon, and I got sucked in, and I was just watching all these films and enjoying all the tropes. And honestly, it didn't even really click with me until you said it pretty recently. Like it's like a man's fantasy, and that's the perfect way to describe this franchise. It got me just sucked in, and who the hell doesn't want to be James Bond? So that's how I discovered Bond, and ever since then, I see them all in theaters, even the bad ones, and there are some bad ones, but for the most part, there's always something to enjoy about them, right, David?
Yeah, and what does that they say about Bond? Men want to be him and girls want to be with him.
Yeah.
So us over on the other side of the pond, and I may have touched on this before, but I'll just run through it again. In the north of Ireland, we had terrestrial television stations like the BBC and ITV, and they used to show the Bond movies around holiday periods. I always kind of remember them being on around like bank holidays, Easter time, or we have a couple of May bank holidays and stuff like that. So they used to be on then. And it's funny because recently, John, things have been popping up on my YouTube about talking about the Christmas Day schedule on the BBC or the ITV, and they go through from the 70s through to the 90s. And out of interest, I've been watching a few of these, and like in the early 80s, they were showing an awful lot of like James Bond movies on Christmas Day. Late 70s, early 80s, like Roger Moore, James Bond films. So I'm thinking that maybe that is some of my early formative memories of the Bond franchise. I explained in For Your Eyes Only that Roger Moore was my Bond growing up. When I thought of Bond, that's who I thought of. And it was always my dad who used to say, Sean Connery was the best Bond. And then it got to the 90s, and the likes of ITV would branch off to ITV2. And during the summer, they would have Bond marathons. So they would be showing a different Bond movie like every Tuesday night for like 8 weeks. You know, maybe just the Moore era, and you could sit down and you could watch them. But I was kind of fascinated with my dad telling me about Connery being the best. I wanted to go back and watch his ones, and especially because of Robert Shaw. When I found out he was one of the main villains in one of the early Sean Connery movies. So that's how I was kind of introduced to the franchise. But by the time I got to like a mid-teenager, I was totally kind of not interested in Bond whatsoever. And this is when Pierce Brosnan came along. I wasn't interested in James Bond. I almost felt like embarrassed by the franchise. And I think that it was because of kind of the carry on of the Roger Moore era. It wasn't until Skyfall. I watched Skyfall in the cinema. Our work got free tickets and brought the whole office. Or I don't know if they got free tickets. They must have booked out. Sorry, they booked out the whole cinema, and the whole office went. And we went into the cinema. We watched Skyfall, and that reignited my love of Bond. So that's 2012. I had the Connery movies on DVD. I also had A View to a Kill and License to Kill because I really enjoyed them two movies. And I watched them, and then I went, I need more Bond. I need to revisit the Moore era. And I revisited the Moore era, and I just had this newfound appreciation for Roger Moore. So I think from around then, in the last 10 years or so, is when I feel like I've become more of a Bond fan than I've ever been before.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd probably have to I'm trying to think of like maybe the last I would say I've been a big Bond fan probably since I would say Casino Royale was when I really started to get into Bond. Like I like Pierce Brosnan, and we'll get into Pierce Brosnan because we have a little bit of a structure of the Bonds we're gonna talk about. But like that was like my Bond when I was a kid, and I saw all those movies. But it wasn't like until Casino Royale came out, and I have a very distinct memory of I was at the gym. I was this young guy at the gym, I was overweight, so my dad got me a personal trainer for a little while, and he wanted me to. And the guy I remember just telling me about how good Casino Royale was. And I was like, really? And I was like, I gotta go see this in theaters. And sure enough, I went and saw it, and I just fell back in love with it. The problem is with Daniel Craig, and we'll get into that too, is that it was just wildly inconsistent with the films. So, but
Yeah.
I have those kind of memories. And also, you reminded me, like with Skyfall, it's like when Spectre came out, my job actually had, because I worked for Budweiser, actually had they must have had some sort of tie-in, but Batista was a
Mhm.
villain in freaking Spectre. They actually had him come to my job and gave out a bunch of like James Bond memorabilia, and I wore like a 007 hat to work for like 2 years straight.
Well, it's funny you saying that is like the Bond franchise has been around for so long now. I mean, it's the longest running movie franchise of all time and probably the most successful. Um, Especially over here, like it's a British institution.
Hmm.
The movies are always on. It's always a big deal, when a new movie's coming out. There's always a big deal when one Bond retires and who's going to be the next one. So it's, growing up as well in the 80s and 90s, and then the revival in my opinion, the revival with Craig, it's always been around. It's always been around you. And I had a memory come into my head actually recently when I was, we were on holidays in Scotland, um, in the late 80s. And I remember like my dad bringing me so we went to a place called Butlins in Ur in Scotland, and it was like this an amusement kind of like a holiday camp, the amusement parks and amusement rides, and then there was chalet bungalows or there was caravans, and they had a big leisure center with the swimmers and all this business and entertainment centers and restaurants and bars. And I remember my dad taking me to watch. It must have been, what do you call that one again? The first Dalton one.
The Living Daylights.
The Living Daylights, because I always remember that scene at the start, watching that scene at the start of him in Gibraltar. And
With
like,
the sniper.
yeah, and I just always I always have these memories of the beginnings of the Bond movies. They're my most vivid memories of these movies. I always remember the beginning of them, and that's kind of the impact it had on me at that age. You know.
Oh yeah, no, they stick with you. And it's funny because I didn't come to the Dalton ones until pretty recently, and I just even though he only got 2, and we'll talk about him, but I just absolutely love it. And it's funny that you mentioned that they're like a British institution because they really are. And I think for a lot of people here, especially when I was growing up, that was like our only connection to like that other side of the pond, like that side of the world, like like especially like that where they kind of crossed over because everyone loves the James Bond franchise. They, at that time when I was growing up, they had video games. GoldenEye was huge,
Mhm,
but even though not every James Bond is played by a British person, I just don't always I've always felt like James Bond shouldn't be played by an American, even though they
mhm.
try. The very first James Bond film is I forget what the name of it is. Is it called Casino Royale?
It's Casino Royale, but it was David Niven is in that, and Peter Sellers as well.
Yeah, and that's just basically like it's a shorter film, but it's like in black and white, and it's not really very it's not the same. And it's just like that they tried to Americanize it, but then they finally got it right when they made the full franchise going forward. But they're very much like just coped with like British sensibilities, I've always
Yeah.
felt.
See, I think Casino Royale that was more of a comedy. I've never seen it, but the black and white one you're thinking of, was that not a TV
Yeah, well, that's the first one.
episode? It was black and white, and it was an American played him in that. But then before that, there was also a radio series as well. And oh, who was the guy who played him in that? Because he ended up being a British television game show host who played him in that. In the oh, I can picture him. He presented a show called Blockbusters here,
Hmm.
so he did, and he done him on the. I'm near certain he done him on the radio, and then there was an American Barry. It's Barry somebody or other, not Barry Pringle. Uh,
My favorite Barry.
he played him in the in this. I think it was a TV episode. Um, and then there was a Casino Royale movie made with Peter Sellers and David Niven, or am I thinking of the Pink Panther? But they made the Pink Panther as well, and that was before we get into the Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, James Bond official movies with Sean Connery and Doctor No.
Yeah, which is, honestly, you come out of the gate swinging with Doctor No, which is still a great Bond film in my opinion. It's a little raw. You can see the lower budget. I remember when I watched the 4Ks for it last year. I was like, yeah, they're finding their footing here on it, but it's still there. And Sean Connery, like, obviously through his whole life, he'll always be known as James Bond right up
Mm-hmm,
until he died, and even no matter
mm-hmm,
what else he did. And he had a great career resurgence, like in the 80s and 90s, even well after he played Bond. But he was just perfect. He had the perfect voice, the perfect look for it. He was suave, and he can pull off those lines like nobody else.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so we go into the Sean Connery area, and we start with Doctor No, which isn't the first novel. I
No.
think that they didn't have the rights to Casino Royale, as I just mentioned. Somebody else had the rights to them, and they already made a movie about it. But I think it's more of like a stand up. I've never seen it, so they settled on Doctor No to be the first Bond movie. And as you say, I mean, it was a bit. I believe it was a big hit, and it is a bit raw, and I do class it as one of the best Bond movies because it is the one that kind of kick-started the whole franchise. Um, but I believe it's very entertaining, bit dated for its time. But as you say, it was. I always feel as if a lot of the Bond actors, they're always a bit raw in their first movies.
Yes, exactly. And this is a whole new franchise at the time too, and it didn't get a huge budget, like so they had to like figure it out. And but like you said, it was successful, and that's what leads to the sequel.
Yeah, and then of course we move into From Russia with Love, which for me, this is my favorite Bond movie of all time. Is From Russia with Love. I feel as if that From Russia with Love. I've read the novel. It's such a great novel as well, and this movie to me is it almost feels like it didn't have to star James Bond. This is just a great spy thriller to me.
Yeah, it is a great spy thriller, and obviously, it's got one of your boys in there because I wouldn't. If we're going back to our origins, I think it would be wrong not to bring up Jaws on this podcast and Robert Shaw playing one of the antagonists in this. And that fight scene, I remember when I was doing my research for this, is considered one of those like big action like set pieces for the time,
Mhm.
like that they were able to like pull this fight scene off on the train.
hmm Yeah, I mean it's so realistic. That's the thing. That's what's so scary about it. It is a very realistic fight. It's not over the top. There's the two big guys going at it. Shaw is genuinely scary, And of course, that was part of the reason why he was cast as Quentin Jaws, because because Spielberg looked at his performance in that movie and went, "Yeah, I could believe this guy's intense. I could believe that he could be this shark killer." But even to this day, people still look at that performance and take inspiration from it. We've seen it. You just mentioned that the guy isn't that the guy that was on the train, Inspector, that visited your work?
Not that guy.
Was that guy?
My guy who visited on my job at work was, I guess he's kind of based on him. I guess supposed to maybe they are the same character. But like Batista, the wrestler, was what came to my job.
Was he the one that fought him on the train? But
Was it that? Did he fight him on the train in
Inspector,
He
he's a big
might
guy
have.
with a bald head.
Yes, that is
He
him. That
knocks
is
him out the train. He hits him with a chain and puts him out the train.
that is him. You're
That
absolutely,
whole scene is inspired by From Russia with Love.
yeah. Not as good as Russia with Love, Spectre, though. Let me tell you.
Oh God, no! But that scene, that's not the best scene in that whole movie on that train, that fight. But that's what that is totally taken from. That's taken from Russia with Love.
Oh, yeah.
It's inspired by that. And when you look at people like Max Zorin, again, Christopher Walken, he bleached his hair blonde as a homage to Robert Shaw.
Mm. Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I remember it's funny going all the way back to the beginning when me and Matt did this. Matt watched the whole movie and despite Jaws being his second favorite film, had no idea that was Robert Shaw just because of how he looked. Like, I guess he's just like maybe not seen enough Robert Shaw movies, but like,
Yeah.
thinking that he's gonna look like Quint all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, no, that was Robert Shaw.
Yeah, he's so young and then he had the bleach blonde hair. I can't remember why I had the bleach
Very
blonde hair in the
fit
movie.
too.
Very fit as well. I love how Clep punches him in the stomach, to
Oh,
check out his fitness and stuff like that. But yeah, for me, From Russia with Love, John, is as I say, it's just such a great spy movie. And then we move into Goldfinger, which look, I remember having a conversation one night. My nephew was starting to get into Bond movies, and because my dad had just watched No Time to Die, and he was like, "Well, which one should I start with?" And my dad was like, "Doctor No," and I says, "Well, no, actually start with Goldfinger." And my dad was like, "Well, Doctor No's the first one, you know." And I was like, "No, but for me, Goldfinger is the movie that basically set the template for everything that came after it."
exactly.
And yeah, that's how I feel about Goldfinger. Goldfinger is a tremendous movie. It's definitely one of the best Bond movies of all time. And the thing about it is, as I say, it really set the template for the Bond franchise going forward. I feel as if it didn't really know what it wanted to be or what it was before that. A lot of From Russia with Love for me, John, took a lot from North by Northwest. In the movie, Goldfinger is the one that really, I think it was the biggest hit of the franchise up until then. That was the template for the franchise going forward.
It's still a favorite Bond film amongst most Bond fans. Like, usually, if anyone comes to the Bond franchise, usually they almost feel obligated to put Goldfinger at number one because, like you just said, it's like the first two films were building to this, and now the rest of the films following have to, like, if you want to watch like a perfect outline of what a Bond film should be, you watch Goldfinger. You get a great villain sidekick, an odd job. And you also get like great set pieces, and the cold opening is awesome too. Like that white suit's iconic. It's like it actually every time I see it though, I just think of Temple of Doom, but it's iconic because of this movie.
Yeah, and not only that, and we'll touch on it now. The soundtrack, the score. John Barry was the first full score he done, I believe, was From Russia with Love. The song From Russia with Love was played at the end of the movie, but here we have Shirley Bassey at the very start singing Goldfinger.
Goldfinger,
yeah, which has to be, in my opinion, the most iconic Bond song of all time. And nearly every Bond song after that was trying to live up to that.
Shelley Easton gets pretty damn close for your eyes only.
Sheena or Shelley? Did you say Shelley?
Did I say Shelley? Yeah,
I said Shelley. It sounded like Shelley. So
that's a trait of the show as well. Shelley. So I'm going to get someone's name wrong by a lot.
Shelley Easton. But yeah, and then you had you had Robert Shaw. You had Robert Shaw as the iconic henchman in From Russia with Love, but Oddjob is up there as well. But I feel as if the started touch. I mean, you had Dr. No in the first movie with the hands, right? But I think up to this point, Goldfinger has to be one of the most iconic Bond villains of all time.
Oh yeah, he gets probably the most memorable line for any villain from a Bond film. Would you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond. I expect you to
Yeah,
die.
yeah. I
Like,
expect you to die.
yeah, like, and it's also crazy with these old Bond movies. They're like kind of like strung together a lot of time. Like even recently, still in the Bond film that we talked about, like they would dub people. Like he's dubbed. Like you
Yeah,
don't even realize it watching it. It's done so well.
yeah. I'm there certain he was German, I think, and he read his lines in German. He could
Yeah,
speak English, then they came back and dubbed him.
yeah.
So if we watch his mouth, he's speaking German.
It's crazy, but it's the audio wise, like actually get it right. There's movies you watch today, and you're like, Jesus Christ, that guy's dubbed.
Yeah, that's right. And just as I said about, as I say, the score for me, this is For Mercy with Love score is brilliant as well. But I think that the Goldfinger score is outstanding, and I think that's carried over for me, John, into Thunderball. I really like the Tom Jones song, Thunderball, but I feel as if it's trying to be Goldfinger.
Yeah, they really wanted to try and this is like a common theme, like with Bond films, like as they go along, it's like they just get too far out there a little bit, and then they have to reel them in. It's like we have to escalate a little bit what we did with Goldfinger and unfortunately, it's like hard to recapture the magic twice. Although I do like Thunderball.
Oh, the movie or the song? Sorry.
Oh, I like them both. I'm just saying it's
Oh,
like overall, just in general, it's kind of hard. I feel like they had to try and like live up to Goldfinger just because of like
yes.
how well it was received and how financially successful it
Oh,
was.
yes. Oh, yeah. And he strikes like thunderbolt. Yeah, sorry, I just had to get that out of me. Yes, I absolutely love Thunderball. Thunderball is one of my favorite Bond movies, but you can see the formula here. Like
Oh
what you
yeah.
were saying about the tux at the start of Goldfinger, just how it's like a wee mini mission. That's where it started because the start of For Mercy with Love is a plot point, right? And then they have this wee mini mission at the start of Goldfinger. This is where it starts. Then they have the same at the start of Thunderball, where he goes off in the jetpack and stuff like that.
Oh
But
my
what I,
God, it's still one of the craziest things that they just whipped that out.
yeah, and he's got the Aston Martin DB5 at the start that comes back as well. But it's like, but it's kind of like for me, Thunderball. See, I I believe that Thunderball's like apparently he's like Marmite. There's people that love it, and there's people that not hate it but don't really like it that much because it's a bit more of a slower pace than Goldfinger. It's a bit more of a lazy type of movie. I've seen people criticize, for example, the overlong underwater sequences, but
Yes, that
that
was my
that
biggest criticism.
well, that's what I actually like about it. I like that it's been described as like a hangout movie, and I kind of like that. I like the idea of just you're going on like a vacation with Bond, and he's just kind of hanging about the Bahamas and things like that. And I think what they were trying to do back then was just show off the underwater photography. You got to remember, this is the '60s. A lot of people hadn't
It
seen
was
stuff
new.
like that before. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I remember actually, I've said it in reviews about this movie that like this is just stuff that they would have like cut down into shorter sequences now and edited a little better. But you're right. I also remember reading that like this was all new technology and they want to show off, and I get that because if you're the first one to do it, why not show it? Then eventually, they've had another staple of a lot of Bond films is underwater sequences.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. And then of course when you move into the likes of You Only Live Twice, again, an absolutely amazing song, iconic score, absolutely love it. But this for me is when Bond is trying to top itself. It starts becoming a wee bit more zany, a wee bit more over the top. I feel as if those first four Bond movies for me, that's why they're some of my favorites, John, because they're a wee bit more grounded and down to earth. But now we're starting to head towards the silliness. I feel I really do. And of course, sorry, we're also building up to this reveal of Blofeld,
Hmm.
and I really do love that whole ending sequence in the volcano.
Oh, it's
Um,
a great set piece there. And great
yeah,
action there as well. I love that. I do love that. The problem with this movie for me is all the Japan stuff and like him trying to
yes,
be Japanese, like and blend in, is just fucking ridiculous.
with the wig and the makeup and
Yeah.
it it's weird. You wouldn't get away with that now.
Oh my god, no. Oh my god, no. He's literally dressed up like he's supposed to be a Japanese man, and I'm like, who falls for that anyway?
No, definitely not. And and you're right. That's there's a bit of a lag in the middle. Now it's been a while since I've watched some of these, but it's for just going from memory here. It's a bit of a lag in the middle there. Overall, I think You Only Live Twice is a good Bond movie. It's just not as good as the first four, and I especially feel as if this is one of the movies that Austin Powers heavily, satired and spoofed from. Even Doctor Evil. I love Donald Pleasance playing Blofeld. It's my favorite Blofeld of the series. It's good. It's just not as good as the other four.
No, exactly. Although they do have a good run with Blofeld. Usually, I like a lot of the actors they get for that to get to play Blofeld. But yeah, definitely like ripped off a lot from this one, especially. And then obviously the next film in the series is the one that started it all for us.
We have all the time in the world, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I think it's starting to get its props now.
Yeah, now it is.
No, it is. For many years, an underappreciated Bond movie, mainly because of Sean Connery, in my opinion, burning out. And Big Fry, George Lazenby, filling his boots, I think he was a model turned actor and a bit of a wooden one at that. And but aside from that, he had the look. But it's such a good movie. I think Telly Savalas done a great job as Blofeld. Again, another brilliant score by John Barry. And in my opinion, the most underrated Bond song of all time. I believe this song could be the best Bond song.
Yeah, you know what? That's a fair point. And also just the cinematography in this one. I remember that was one thing when we talked about on our very first episode of the Let's Talk Movies podcast, which I don't even remember what it was called back then. One of the very was it called that?
I think it was just called I think it was Let Talk. I think you called it Let's Talk Movies podcast. I think it was originally called.
Oh, okay. So at least it was
or it may have just been Let's Talk Podcast.
Might have just been that, right? I don't know.
It may have been just that Let's Talk Podcast.
I just remember though that we touched on how good the cinematography was for this, and then the tragic ending is always what stands out very much about this movie. Is like, and then I love that like for a while they kept playing it up that like even when we just talked about For Your Eyes Only, how they played up like that he's still mourning the death of her. I think that was twice they brought it up during the Roger Moore era, and that's good because like that was just heartbreaking that happened to him.
Yeah, that whole tie-in is just to tell people this is the same character.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same with George Lazenby. This isn't a new character. This isn't a different series. This is the same series. There's a clip in Majesty's Secret Service of him going through his drawers and he's pulling out souvenirs which he collected from the first 5 movies. And you can hear like the music playing from those movies in the background when he's pulling the gear out, just to say, yeah, this is the same James Bond. This is not a different guy, But you're right. I think that this is one of the this could be the best ending of a Bond movie ever. It's so hard hitting.
Yeah, it hits you like a ton of bricks. But unfortunately, George Lazenby did not want to come back, and that's why I guess they asked Sean Connery to come back and fill the shoes one more time.
They paid him a fortune.
They must have had to, right? Because he didn't want to be Bond anymore.
They paid him like $1 million, which is nobody was getting paid $1 million then to play the actor in a movie.
No. I mean, that's all Jim Carrey ever wanted in the 90s was like a $1 million check.
Yeah, so how could you turn that down? And I think he came back. I don't think his heart was completely in it. I actually think the producers were trying to get Roger Moore, but they couldn't get him. I think he was contracted to the Saint at the time. So I think then they turned to Lazenby and then they asked Connery to come back. He done it for the money. I don't think his heart was in it. You can tell by the shape he's in. He's not in the best of shapes. He looks 20 years older, even though it's only been a few years.
He thought he was retired.
And he still looks retired during the movie, John. And for me, up to this point, this is the worst Bond movie so far to this point. I mean, like Diamonds Are Forever for me is the campiness of it, the stupidity of it. Shirley Bassey comes back to do the song, which I think is one of the better Bond songs. Has another lovely score by John Barry, but it becomes a wee bit of a camp fest for me by this stage.
Yeah, I think this is where all the Bond jokes really started to come into play for a lot of people. Like, all the satire and stuff like that of like what James Bond was, because it really, that stuff didn't really come to fruition until a lot of the Roger Moore films, but like it's like Sean Connery had those moments as well, and I think this is
Yeah,
where a lot of it really came from Diamonds Are Forever. But the
yeah,
song is iconic. I mean, I think that's probably another one of the most famous ones because Diamonds Are Forever, like stuff that got crossover play.
yeah. Forever, forever. Yeah. People think of the real campy stuff started with Roger Moore, but it didn't. I think it started in You Only Live Twice. It's amped up here to 11 in Damon's for whatever reason. I don't understand why. I don't know if it's just because of the time, but I think I mentioned before when we were doing our podcast on Diamonds, if it's on like on a Sunday afternoon, we're having a lazy Sunday afternoon, you fire it on and you don't take it too serious, you can have fun with it. But it definitely wouldn't be one of my go-to Bond movies, definitely, and especially for Connery.
No, 100%. And then finally, Roger Moore is hired, and I love his first film, Live and Let Die.
Say, live and let die.
Yeah, we move into the Roger Moore era, which basically spans from 1990. Now, I'm going to correct myself. Got this wrong on the For Your Eyes Only podcast. His first movie was Live and Let Die in 1973, and he finishes his era in 1985 with A View to a Kill. And for me, I think that Live and Let Die is my favorite of his movies.
Really? Yeah, you said you were between The Spy Who Loved Me and you thought maybe For Your Eyes Only.
Well, actually, I think I said in that podcast there that it's Live and Let Die and The Spy Who Loved Me. But when I watched For Your Eyes Only, I was thinking, oh, could this be better? Could this be my favorite? So it's between them three. But I think I think Live and Let Die for me is my favorite of his. Again, I think this is the first Bond movie where John Barry doesn't do the score. I think it's George Martin of Beatles fame, and I really enjoy the score in this film. I think it really suits it. I love how they bring Bond down to a smaller scale, a smaller level, where he's just going after I think it's like a drug baron.
Yeah, he's in like New Orleans for a lot of this movie, if I remember right.
Yeah, but Damon's he was in Vegas, wasn't he? But then he is in New Orleans in this one, and just like the smaller scale operation that's going on in this, and I think it really suits Moore. Again, he's very raw, just as Connery was in the first movie, and he's just finding his feet. And I just like the whole vibe of the movie, the whole feel of it. I think Moore looks incredible as Bond. I think it's the best he's ever looked as Bond, because he still kind of looks young. We're not all black, and he's got the Magnum instead of the Walther PPK. It just feels just a wee bit different than what we've had before, and it's so great.
Yeah, I really like this one too, and obviously the Paul McCartney song is great as well. Still gets radio play here in the United States, which is fucking crazy. Because I think honestly, I think maybe we might have brought this up on our show at the time that the song is probably more popular than the movie.
Yeah, I think we had brought it up in our podcast, John, that that's the type of song that could be released today and still be a big hit. Whereas a lot of the other Bond songs that have came before that do kind of feel like of their time. This one doesn't. I have to just say, I really detest Guns N' Roses, their cover of it.
Do you really? I like that cover.
Hate it.
Live and let die.
He's more like a cat. He's like, live and let die.
It's Axel,
No,
Axel himself has like aged very nicely. He looks like now the mother from the Goonies.
Be a remake then of the Goonies. You could get him to play Ma for
Kelly. Yep, exactly. It's like don't even change a thing. Just come in with what you're wearing.
Yeah, but no, I think it's a great debut for Roger Moore, and the only thing is that I do feel that the next movie, The Man with the Golden Gun, is a big step down. What's that? Sorry,
you have to sing this one.
Oh yeah. So let me think of that. The Man with the Golden Gun.
I've heard you do this one before.
That's right. I'm trying to think how it goes again. Okay, here we go. He has a powerful weapon. He charges a million shot. I'm assassin, second to none, the man with the golden gun. Yeah, again, one of my least favorite Bond songs of all time. Very cheesy, signed by Lulu, but a really nice John Barry score. I like how the score plays throughout this. I don't know. It's just it's a bit laborious. This movie, John. How do you feel about it? I mean, Christopher Lee comes
I
back
love Christopher Lee in this, though. That's the only
as
thing.
Scaramanga.
Yeah, I like him a lot. What was his henchman name? The
Nick-
little guy.
Knick-knack.
Knick-knack. I always just thought this movie was just fucking ridiculous. That's what I remember most about this movie. Is just like the things they went for with it. But I don't know. I have a very soft spot all the time just for Christopher Lee. It's kind of like how I forget which one Christopher Walken's the villain for. You can remind me when we get there. It's just
Yeah.
like when I see him on screen, I'm just like, yeah, you got a big actor to play the villain, and that's always gonna appeal to me a little bit.
Oh, Monsieur Bond. Yeah, I just want to punch him in the face. Yeah, so you have Scaramanga with the 3 nipples, and you've got his right hand man is Knick-knack, and yes, he's an assassin, sagging the nun, and
the funhouse sequences are great.
yeah, there's some great. Like, I don't hate this movie.
It's
It's
uneven.
kind of middle of the road for me.
Yeah, I would say that too. And then, the next year, 1977, they did The Spy Who Loved Me, which is one of his best.
Well, again, there's this train of thought, John, and we've touched on this in our other Bond podcast, that the Bond actors really get into their stride in their third movies. When you think about that, you think about Goldfinger, you think about The Spy Who Loved Me. I don't know about Pierce Brosnan, but the likes of Skyfall with Craig, and the other 2 actors, they didn't get to their third movie. And this is definitely where Roger Moore finds his feet with The Spy Who Loved Me. Again, John Barry didn't do the score, so we've got somebody else doing the score in this, and it became iconic. It's a real 1970s kind of Bond theme. But you went from Knick-knack to 7'9" Jaws. And as we touched on before, a lot of the Bond movies in this era, they kind of like reflected what was happening in cinema at the time. So you had like Live and Let Die, which was like reflecting that blaxploitation movies. And then you have The Man with the Golden Gun, which had a bit of kung fu in it. That was supposed to reflect the kind of the kung fu movies that were coming through at the time with Bruce Lee and things like that. And in this one here was a response to the success of Jaws. And you have the likes of like the underwater villain with like the webbed hands, and he wants to like flood the world and take over the world and all this. And then of course you literally have a villain called Jaws with metal teeth. And it has so many iconic moments in Bond history. Never mind just Roger Moore, the Lotus Esprit as well. But the villain and I know like Bond fans that cite the Bond theme in this movie as the best version of the Bond theme of all time.
It is definitely very well done in this movie. One of my favorites as well. And
Yeah.
seeing the Lotus underwater is a memory that always stands out to me as far as the whole entire Roger Moore franchise.
Putting the fish out the window.
Yeah,
But
I wouldn't be
like,
Roger Moore.
yeah, if you had a Mount Rushmore of Bond movies, this is on it.
It has to be, because it might be one of up there with Goldfinger. This might be his defining film. It might not be our
Yes.
favorites, but it's probably the Roger Moore defining film. I think all the Bonds have a film that like defines their era.
Yes, and you're 100% right. And I said at the time when we reviewed this, like Roger Moore's been no better than he was as Bond in this movie. Now, that doesn't mean he was bad after that, but this is like his best performance. He's on point here. All his one-liners, everything just works in this movie.
I completely agree. And then obviously Moonraker was the next one, which we've talked about as being a response to 1977's Star Wars. And they kind of like, this wasn't actually supposed to be the next film that they did, but I guess they wanted to keep up with the Joneses,
Yeah, that's right. I think they were supposed to do For Your Eyes Only, but with the success of Star Wars, there was like Bond has to go to space. And, if we have Diamonds Are Forever for Sean Connery, we have Moonraker for Moore. And I'm sorry to say, excuse me, this movie is actually growing on me.
I was gonna say it before you said it that like I feel like there's a lot of over exaggeration if you read online before you actually watch the movie about how bad this movie is. It's not that bad. It really isn't. Is it a little bit cheesy and over the top? Bond goes to space. But for the most part, if you watch the movie, it's not a badly made movie. It's still got everything you want in a Bond film in it. It's just a very over exaggerated version of that.
Yeah, there's things in the movie that I really hate. I think that's what brings it down. Like when he comes out of the what do you call it, when he's in Venice, when he comes out of the canal
Oh,
in that
that is
boat.
ridiculous. The
And
noises and everything. I
but
remember the
but you
sound
have
effect.
like you have the pigeon doing the double take and the guy drunk guy looking and he's from for your eye or sorry, the spy love me, him making a reappearance. There's things in it that really drag it down for me. But there's other parts of the movie that I love. Like the villain, Eve the evil Drax, with the beard, but him releasing the hounds on the girl that's actually betrayed him into the woods. I mean, it's very dreamy, very scary. Barry returns for the score. This is one of his best. I love the score when they're like taking off and going into space. And you go from like From Russia with Love, which is like to me a proper 60s spy thriller. Now you have space battles right, with like space marines and they're firing lasers at each other, and it's ludicrous. But in saying that, again, we don't take it too serious. You can enjoy it. And that kind of those special effects in
They're
space,
great.
in my opinion, are some of the best ever done. Um, well, it still holds up today. But if you
Mhm.
look at the technology they were using at the time, it's some of the best. It's up there with Star Wars. It's up there with 2001: Space Odyssey. 100%. All that stuff's great.
Yep, I completely agree. I love the effects for that. And then for a movie we literally just talked about, For Your Eyes Only, we start the John Glenn era, which would be the entire 1980s of Bond films. And we literally just had a whole conversation on this last week. But is there anything you want to add to it?
Yeah, well, this is fresh in our memories.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate, if anybody hasn't watched that podcast, go and watch that podcast. But this for me is one of the most, in my opinion, underrated Bond movies ever made. That bring the tone back to earth. That's what they wanted to do. They made a wee bit more of a serious tone, a wee bit more of a harder edge. It's got all the elements of a Bond movie without being too over the top. You've got, apart from the opening scene, with Blofeld, killing Blofeld off, but it's got the underwater stuff, you know what I mean? It's got the skiing, we've got the Bond girls in there. Well, you have Bond going on a mission. It's not a guy trying to take over the world. He just has to retrieve, as you say, the MacGuffin to save not the world, just so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. And I like all that about this film as well.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very, very much. And it might be my favorite of the Roger Moore era. I love the score. And obviously I told you I also really love the opening song. It's one of the best ones in my opinion. I know you weren't as big a fan as me, but you aren't a big fan of Arms of Orion either, which is a
Yeah.
shame.
Maybe you can sing this one.
Yeah, for your eyes only. Yeah. My middle school chorus trained. Now, the next two movies are 1983's Octopussy and 1985's A View to a Kill. I don't really recall these movies too much, so I can't really say too much on them. So if you want to speak on them, you can.
Yeah, which is fair enough, because do you know why? I'm gonna disclaimer right now. I haven't seen any of the Pierce Brosnan era, so we're gonna leave that for you, John. So look, Octopussy's one. I haven't seen Octopussy in a while. I want to revisit it after watching For Your Eyes Only. But for me, I know it's a beloved movie within the Bond franchise. For me, I think it's one of my least favorites of Moore. It starts going back to the silliness again. Even the song isn't great. All Time High. It's an all time high. all time low, if you ask me. Yeah. So can't remember much about it. I need to go back to this one. I know I should have thought about this, but it's not. I remember the beginning where it's really good where they kind of kill off like 009, and you think it's Moore. It's kind of like a play on the start of From Russia with Love, and it turns out, that's the opening, that they make that a plot point, and Bond then has to go after this MacGuffin that this 009 is working on, and find out who killed them and why, and all this, and it's all involved with the Soviets and things like that. But the whole ending is like a carry on as well, where he has to stop a bomb from detonating in a circus, and so he dresses up as a clown. It's wild, mate. It's wild. It's just not one of my favorites at all. As I say, it's been a while since I've watched that one. I feel like I'm selling people short here because I should have came more prepared. But it's definitely, for me, one of my least favorites. Maybe just above The Man with the Golden Gun, but maybe my second least favorite in the Moore era.
That's a shame. And then
Mhm.
what about A View to a Kill?
But A View to a Kill, as I know, is like A View to a Kill for a lot of people is considered one of the worst Bond movies of all time. But
But Roger Moore wasn't supposed to come back, right?
well, after we done our last podcast, I kind of but been listening to a few Bond podcasts myself, and apparently he wasn't supposed to come back after Moonraker. He decided to leave, and they couldn't really get anybody, so they asked him to come back for Your Eyes Only, and then that's what you were saying. I think he was like on a rolling picture after that. He came back for Octopussy, and then again retired, and they couldn't get who they wanted, so they went back to Moore again, and he came back, at the last moment to play that role, even though he was like hitting 60 at the time. And a lot of people criticized him for being too old to be with some of the girls in the movie, or to doing some of the action sequences. Me personally, on reflection, I think they should have played into that. I think they should have played into his age. I think the main Bond girl in that gets a lot of flack because she's all throughout the movie, all she's doing is shouting after him, "Oh, James, oh, James." But I think they should have played him more of a father figure to her. So I think there's mistakes made. But see, aside from that, The View to a Kill to me, John, is a guilty pleasure of mine. It really is. I think it's one of John Barry's best scores. A View to a Kill by Duran Duran is my favorite Bond song of all time. I love the whole climax on the Golden Gate Bridge, the whole fight. I think Max Zorin, played by Christopher Walken, is amazing as the villain. It's a bit slow in parts. I feel as if it could be tightened up a bit, but I feel as if it's on a more kind of down to earth level that For Your Eyes Only is. Yeah. And you've got Grace Jones in there.
Can't do that wrong with that.
Who Bond sleeps with, and it's like, okay.
Well, I wouldn't expect him to do anything less, would I?
He does it for Queen and Country.
Queen and Country. And now we get our fourth James Bond, one of my personal favorites, Timothy Dalton, who did 2 Bond films. He did The Living Daylights, which I actually just rewatched last week, and License to Kill, which is a very good film as well. So what do you think of the Dalton era films? Which is a shame. I always felt like we only got 2 from him.
Yeah, you know what? It is a big shame that we only got 2. And as I've touched on earlier, there are, a lot of these actors, the best Bonds, they really didn't hit their stride to their third movie. So it is a shame that he wasn't able to come back for the third one. But I feel as if Dalton is the Bond that John Glenn wanted at the start of the decade. And he eventually gets him towards the end. License to Kill was one of them movies that kind of always stuck with me when I seen it on television. I think we had touched on it before, John. It kind of feels that it really does. Even though a lot of these movies are products of their time, as we just touched on there about certain movies reflecting the trends of the time, without a doubt, License to Kill reflects the late 80s, those type of movies that were coming out at the time. Like anti-heroes. well, yes, cops who were became anti-heroes who were going up against drug barons, right? And it's, and you have that whole scene with him hunting his badge. His partner gets attacked his wife gets killed at the start. His partner near dies, and Felix, is basically his partner, and he hands in they say, "Bond, you're off the case," and he's like, "No, you're off your case, chief," and hands him his badge, and he says, "Give me your gun." Then he escapes, and then he goes after them, while he's not licensed to do so. So I've always enjoyed that movie because of that, maybe because of that. But then it made me go back and revisit The Living Daylights. I always thought License to Kill was his best movie, but I really think that The Living Daylights is his best film. What do you think, John?
So I think I like License to Kill a little bit more just because it's a little bit more grittier and harder edged. But the score in The Living Daylights is fantastic. I just
Yes.
absolutely adore the score in The Living Daylights. I love seeing Dalton. Um, the guy who betrays them, I'm forgetting the actor's name, like who they save at the beginning and then ends up betraying them anyway. He does he does the exact same thing in The Fugitive, which is fucking crazy. He almost plays the exact same part. So I always thought that was great. And like there's some great action sequences. It also ends on a great action sequence with the plane. And I think
Yes.
Dalton, he's playing it a little less funny. He gets some comedic moments in here, but he's playing it a little bit less funny. So I do like The Living Daylights. I think slightly less than License to Kill, but it's a great 1-2 punch to end the 1980s. And it's crazy they went through so much production issues that that was it for Dalton and they moved on.
I feel as if there were certain things from the Moore era left over which bled into The Living Daylights. And I think that's, yeah, they have one foot in and one foot out. You know what I mean? One of my favorite parts of The Living Daylights is when he's driving the car and he says it must have scared the living daylights out of her.
I know he's got that smirk on his face. Must have
Yeah.
scared the living daylights out of her.
Yeah,
'Cause,
and
that's one thing that Dalton does very well is that fucking smirk. He does in Hot
Yeah.
Fuzz also, which I think they were playing on that.
Yeah, and I believe that was taken, that whole sequence was taken from a short story in one of Fleming's books of him, the sniper, shooting down,
Mhm.
But the thing I think of is him and the Bond girl sliding down on the cello, things like that. It's like that's Moore era,
Oh,
yeah. But you're right about the score. One of my favorite parts of that score is when they're in the desert, when he's in the desert with Muhammad Azin.
Okay, that's a great part of the score. I love the actual chase scene with the Ashton Martin through the snow leading up to the cello. Like that's my favorite version of that score. Which
Yeah.
they use that in a bunch of other ones. Like just this is a different variation of it. So I just absolutely just adore that.
Yeah, and of course the song by Aha has like
Oh,
grown on me over the years to the
I
point
love it.
where, yeah, when people talk about Bond songs, nobody ever mentions Aha and The Living Daylights. And again, just like Louis Armstrong, everybody knows Louis Armstrong, but people think about Louis Armstrong, they think about What a Wonderful World, and people know the song We've Got All the Time in the World, but they never ever talk about it in the context of being a Bond song. Maybe that's testament to how great the song is. But we talk about underrated Bond songs, like Aha is up there.
Oh, that's one of my favorites. That one's in my permanent playlist where I play it all the time. The Living Daylights, that song pops up all the time for me. Like at least once a month, I'll listen to that song. And then obviously Timothy Dalton didn't come back, and they moved on to Pierce Brosnan, which I know you're not familiar with his films because you were just bowed out of the franchise for a while there. But Pierce Brosnan was the Bond that I grew up with, and unfortunately, he started off with his best film by far, which is GoldenEye, which is one of my all-time favorites, if not my favorite. It goes back and forth with Skyfall, but this one has a great video game. But this is one where I absolutely love the score, and I want to make sure I get his name right because I'm gonna because a lot of people actually say that's the worst part about this movie. But I don't know if you've ever seen the film The Professional, Leon the Professional.
Yes, I have. Yes,
but it's a very similar sounding score to that, mainly because it's the same guy. His name is Eric Serra.
right.
Okay, so he did that score, and this one, we're out of the Cold War, so Bond's doing a bunch of different things now. At the very beginning of the film, another 00 gets killed, played by Sean Bean, because Sean Bean just has to die in every movie.
Yeah,
and it's all about kind of like getting revenge for that and finding a weapon. Very similar, just Bond themes that you've seen throughout. But this time we get Pierce Brosnan, and to me, he's the definitive looking James Bond film, like James Bond to me. I always felt like he looked like James Bond in my head. Like I said before in the past, when I think of Santa Claus, I think of 1994's The Santa Claus starring Tim Allen. That's what Santa Claus has to always live up to. For me, all James Bonds have to live up to what Pierce Brosnan looks like. The problem is that he does this movie, and it's great. It's a success. Has one of the most successful video games of all time. And then he does Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough, which are fine. They're just okay, middle of the pack kind of James Bond films. Denise Richards is in the third one. I just want to make sure I get The World Is Not Enough as a nuclear scientist. I don't know if you've ever seen Denise Richards. That is one of the most unbelievable, ridiculous things you'll ever see in a Bond film is that she's doing that. And they're just forgettable. They're okay. They're just forgettable. But then Die Another Day came out in 2002, and that is one of the worst James Bond films. It's so bad that it's almost good. Like you can watch stuff online, like the surfing scene where James Bond is like windsurfing, and it looks like just the worst CGI you'll ever see. Rosamund Pike is in this movie, who's most people probably remember from Gone Girl. It's like over diamonds and like just blowing up the planet. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible film. And unfortunately, Pierce only got to do 4 films. I would say that his run as James Bond, despite being a great Bond, was not given the best material other than GoldenEye.
Yeah, you know what? So I've touched on this before, is that when this movie came out in 95, I wasn't really interested in Bond anymore. I mean, I never really was a big into it. You're a child and you see things on the television, and things like that. That's all really, but was not interested in Bond at all. And then when I get back into it again, GoldenEye was on the TV one night and I recorded it. And I got to about an hour in, John, and I just didn't like it at all. I switched it off. So I really do need, and I've promised you, I've said it a load of times, that I'm going to go and watch these 4 movies of Brosnan, and maybe I'll do it over the summer. Maybe me and you can do a show on it or something at some stage. But yeah, I really need to visit these movies. I don't know what it is. I couldn't get into it. I couldn't get into GoldenEye. But
well, I think I cracked the code when it comes to you, because you've told me you're not a big and I'm not like this either, and I think that's why I don't like the final 3 of his films. It's like you're not into just action films, and they really just became generic 90s action films, and I think that's what really hurts the sequels to GoldenEye, in my opinion.
Do you know what I was thinking when I started watching GoldenEye? At the start, where he was one man taking on a whole army, and I thought, that's not James Bond, that's the Terminator, and that's yep.
Well, I believe you with the flying sequence and everything, how he they trick you a little bit, but it's like, how did he get in the plane and lift it at the last second? That's all like just action shit.
Yeah, because you watch Bond anytime before that, even we talked about You Only Live Twice, when he goes into that volcano to take on Blofeld's men, Bond needs an army around him.
Mm-hmm. He's one of many.
Even Thunderball at the end, when they fight the bad guys, Moonraker when he's in space, Bond can't do it all on his own. And if I can remember correctly, now it's been years since I watched it, but I remember sitting watching that and thinking to myself, Jesus, Bond's turned into the Terminator. I was so used to him being, I mean, any more than 3 or 4 or 5 guys he's caught. He's, they catch him and then he has to try and get his way out. They don't kill him. You know what I mean? And that's the whole trope. You know what I mean? We don't kill him. We'll tell him our plans first, then we'll kill him. Right. Tropes, but Bond tropes. But I remember thinking that at the time. So, look, I need to go back and give it another shake. I done it with Moore. I will. I'll have to watch him. I have to complete it. I can't sit here and be a hypocrite and say, oh, I love the Bond franchise, but I've never watched the Pierce Brosnan movie. So I really need to go back and watch them. But as you say, if GoldenEye is the best one, and what am I in for? Would you rank Die Another Day as the worst Bond film of all time?
No, we're gonna get to what I think is the worst Bond film of all time in a second.
Okay.
And that's when we shift over to the Daniel Craig era. And I remember the in-between Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig and how upset people were. I think this was like my Michael Keaton, the Batman, because I wasn't old enough to remember that, where people were pissed that Daniel Craig was cast because he was blonde and had blue eyes. And they couldn't move past that at all. And then, of course, just like with Michael Keaton and Batman and Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, the movie came out and people are like, holy shit. And I think now a lot of people really think that Daniel Craig is one of the better Bonds.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I remember that when he was cast. I remember going down the Thames in a speedboat. And I remember looking at it because it's a big event now. And I remember looking at him and thinking, he's too ugly to be Bond.
You thought he was too? I never thought he was good looking, but there are people who think he's good looking, so I can't really, I can't knock him. I'm not the best looking guy.
I think if he was around in the 60s, he would have played Red Grant.
Oh, you know what? Maybe that's a good point. He's got that kind of look, and they wanted to go for a more like serious take where this Bond's supposed to be in and in the first one, Casino Royale, is the same director as GoldenEye, which is Martin Campbell. So they kind of brought this director in to mold the first Bond film. And I always thought Casino Royale was his second best Bond film.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel as if so they kind of rebooted the whole franchise and the characters. This was supposed to be Bond. I don't think he's even a 00 at the start of this, isn't he? Not.
He gets his license to kill after the opening title sequence of Casino Royale. They do this awesome black and white title sequence, and then he earns his license to kill. So it's literally just him becoming James Bond 007 at the very beginning of it. And then obviously we get to this last one in a second where they want to close the loop on this James Bond being in his own universe.
Yeah, so this is supposed to be like this is kind of like I'm not sure what year this came out, but it's like you have Batman Begins.
2006.
There you go. Well, you have Batman Begins 2005, and that was kind of like rebooting Batman, bringing him back to his origin, back to his roots with Christian Bale. So they done this with Bond. And Casino Royale was one of the ones when I watched Skyfall, somebody says to me, well, you have to watch Casino Royale. They were telling me it was the best one. And they lent me it on DVD and I watched it. And I thought it was good. I didn't think it was amazing. I do think it is a strong Bond movie. I understand there's a lot of people have it as the best Bond movie ever made. I don't know. I find it gets a bit, it goes on a bit, that whole sequence at the end and stuff, and the stuff at the airport and things like that. It's just never done it for me. I love all the stuff with what do you call the with the villain, the guy, the
that's not Mans. Is that Mans Mikkelsen who plays him?
It is, yeah. I can't think of his name because I've read the book. I've read Casino Royale, and I know it's as parts of it stay true to the book. It's not a very long book. It's only 100 odd pages, and it's all about him gambling in this casino to try and bankrupt.
I love the poker
sequence. Those are the best parts of the movie, but all the stuff outside of that, I wasn't that interested in. Him, it was supposed to try and show him how he became this kind of playboy, don't give a shit about anybody, hard drinking, hard ass, because he lost his woman. Right, that's what it was all supposed to show.
Yeah, it sets up the other four films. It's like losing Vespa in this is what sets up everything else. It's like that was like that big emotional thing that kind of hurt him.
Yeah, but that was in the book.
Ah, okay.
Casino Royale was the first book, and that was in that book. And that line he says at the end of the movie, "The bitch is dead," because he finds out she's a double agent, or that's the last line of the book. So all that stuff is great. All the stuff to do to fill it out to make it a motion picture, I wasn't that interested in. Again, very action orientated. The torture scene as well, stuff like that. They were just trying to show how vulnerable Bond was as well, So it's still a very good Bond movie. I just don't know where I'd rank it. I thought I liked Skyfall more, but the more I watch Skyfall, the more I don't think it's as good as I remember. And in between that, we have Quantum of Solace, which I've only seen the once, and when I watched it, I didn't hate it.
I hated it. This is actually my least favorite Bond film because it's dreadfully boring, in my opinion. And there's a reason. One thing I didn't bring up that started during the Pierce Brosnan era that did carry over to Casino Royale is M is played by Dame Judi Dench.
Yep.
She's great. She started out I believe she started out in GoldenEye. So and she carried it all the way through until obviously what happens to her in this franchise era. But I thought that was cool that they carried her over. But yeah, Quantum of Solace was hurt by the writer's strike that happened in 2007. And I think it shows because I just found Quantum of Solace to be it's the biggest sin you can do with a film, in my opinion, has always been be extremely boring. And I never really was bored by a Bond film until Quantum of Solace. Even Die Another Day. Die Another Day is horrible. It's horrible. It's horribly made. The plot is stupid. There's a lot of stupidity in it. It looks bad. But I'm not bored watching Die Another Day. I'm kind of entertained because it's so bad. But this, it's just fucking boring, and that's what kills me about Quantum. I can very, very rarely go back and watch this one.
Well, as I say, I have only ever seen this one once. I believe Quantum of Solace once. I believe it's the shortest Bond movie, isn't it?
And I think that's part of the
shortest Bond movie to be boring. That's some job.
They did it. They sure did it. I just couldn't take it. And this is what kind of hurts me about I feel like in general with the Daniel Craig era is that it's very up and down. You had a high Casino Royale, then you gave us the worst Bond film, and then arguably what is my favorite Bond film is Skyfall because and you bring in an Artur director in this film as well, an Academy Award winning director, and what's his name, Sam Mendes, yeah, and he would direct the next one too. And did he do No Time to Die? I don't know if
he didn't do No Time to Die. It was Falconer.
Okay, Falconer.
Carrie Falconer, or what's his first name?
I'll get the exact name. How to pray? I think it's Fukunaga or something like that.
Fukunaga.
Let me make sure I get it right. Actually, yeah, Carrie Fukunaga. But yeah, he did this Inspector Sam Mendes. But I think that this is the best one, either this or GoldenEye for me, because It's like the culmination of everything with James Bond. It pretty much
Mm,
leading up to it. The plot is very interesting, and of course having, the almost like a mother-son storyline in here, like what Judy Dench means to these
mm.
guys and how she's manipulated them, and seeing Bond like being out of shape and just like being that alcoholic. I finally gave him a lot of vulnerability, which I think could hurt it for a lot of people. I think a lot of people when they watch Skyfall, that might be like, you don't want to see James Bond in this kind of a lost kind of guy when he's never really that. He's always overly confident.
No, well, this is the problem I have with Craig's Bond, right? That whole kind of hard drinking, smoking, womanizing, that is Bond. I mean, if you go read, I've read a handful of novels. That's who he is. This whole idea that he's this suave kind of can do no wrong type of guy that Moore was playing, or even Connery to a certain extent. That's not really true to the character in the novels. That's why Dalton was so good. Dalton was ahead of his time,
Mhm.
right?
He didn't get his
Uh,
proper credit.
well, he was ahead of his time. People didn't want to see that type of Bond in the late 80s. They didn't want to see that type of Bond. But by the time we get to the 2000s, people were ready to see a Bond like that. And that's what Craig, in my opinion, tapped into. My biggest problem with Craig is I could never take him serious as a spy because he was too serious. He was never charming. And I think that Skyfall, I believe, is probably the most popular Bond movie. It made the most money since Thunderball, adjusted for inflation. So I think Thunderball was like the highest grossing for like decades, and then up till Skyfall overtook it. So my issue with Craig was that he's just too serious for me. I just can't take him serious. How can a guy who can't charm anybody gain anybody's trust? That's what I liked about Connery. That's what I liked about Moore. Even Dalton to a certain extent because he was such a good looking guy, right? So, but this guy here to me didn't have the looks and he was always grumpy and sniping at people. And nobody would trust him. But aside from that, I do think the high point of his Bond era is Skyfall. And when I watched Spectre, I was bored to tears. I
Yeah,
had
Spectre.
so much high hopes for Spectre. I think the best scene of the whole movie is the scene on the train, which is just a rip-off of From Russia with Love. And then that whole ending, the torture scene again with what do you call your man, the German, who's basically playing Blofeld, but it's not Blofeld, and it turns out to be
Christoph Waltz.
it turns out to be his brother. I'm like, what the hell is this turned into? And I think part of the problem I have with this era too, John, is all the callbacks, the DB5s and all the stuff they're calling back to all the other Bond movies and saying, remember this, remember this, remember this. I hate that. I don't like that.
That's the era we were living in at that time, though.
Yeah,
Remember
what,
that's the Stranger Things era where everything that's
yeah,
old is new again, and we're all just living on nostalgia, and
yeah.
found its way into the Bond franchise as well. Now, Spectre does have why I don't put it down there with Quantum of Solace is I love the opening scene in New Orleans.
It's been a while since I've watched that one.
Where he's like wearing like the skeleton suit and he's blending in with Mardi
Oh,
Gras. Yeah, like
even
that's
this that's a throwback to Live and Not Die.
yes, it is 100 because obviously that was where most of that movie took place, very
Yeah.
much. But I liked it. I did. I thought it was well photographed and set the movie on a high note. And for me, that was the best scene of the movie. But
Yeah.
yeah, Spectre was very, very uneven. It's just I wasn't as bored as I was with Quantum of Solace, and that's what kills me with that one.
Now the original song, for we haven't really touched on the songs in the Craig era. Casino Royale to me, forgettable. Quantum of Solace, I couldn't tell you what that one is. I think it's Stain, isn't it? It's the White Stripes. It's the White Stripes.
Oh, is it Jack White?
I think it's him. He does that Quantum of Solace one.
That makes sense for the time, actually. 2008.
Yeah, Chris Cornell done Casino Royale. Then I think the White Stripes
Yes.
done Quantum of Solace. Don't have a clue what that's on. And then, but you had Adele doing Skyfall.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
I think it won an Oscar. But see, for me, I like Skyfall, but I don't think it's as good as people think because I think it's one of those things, John, whereas we hadn't had a good Bond song for years, right? All of a sudden, a half decent one comes on. It makes it seem better.
I'm gonna say something here that might piss some people off, but I've never liked Adele.
I don't like Adele either. I don't like Adele.
Oh, okay.
No, you're not gonna piss me off. Maybe piss anybody listening off.
I get that she's a great talent and her voice is incredible. What range, but it's almost like Chloe Zhao directing for me. It's like I'm glad that you're really good at this, but I just can't say that it appeals to me in any single way. Like I've heard that song, that Skyfall song, fucking everywhere for so long when it came out, and I felt like you couldn't escape it, and I just never liked it.
Yeah, I like the song, but I don't like her. But I think it's
No.
overrated. I think it's highly overrated. Okay, a lot of people like the Chris Cornell song, but if you played it to somebody now, they wouldn't know what it's from.
It's
You
not
play
one
s-
of Chris Cornell's best. It's not a Soundgarden song or freaking anything else that he was
Yeah,
doing.
but put on Goldeneye or put on Skyfall or put on A View to a Kill or put on Live and Let Die. People know what that is. Put that Chris Cornell song on, they won't know what it's from. They
It's
won't know what
forgettable.
it is. They don't know it. So I would say that Skyfall's the best Bond song since Goldeneye. Garbage didn't do. I didn't like the Garbage song. I didn't like Madonna's song.
Oh no.
So I'm leaving one out there, aren't I?
Tina
Here-
Turner did Goldeneye, and that one's pretty
Yes.
forgettable.
Yes, I really like GoldenEye because I remember it being of the time. I was a teenager in the mid 90s. I remember it being on the radio. I remember it being on MTV. I remember we had like a cassette, the best hits of the 95, and that was on it, playing the computer, and I would always play. So I have those kind of fond memories of, GoldenEye. But and for those reasons, if I'm listening to a mix of Bond songs, I'm quite happy to listen to it.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, I always just thought and I love Tina Turner. I was always just kind of like with Chris Cornell. I'm like, you got a great artist who I enjoy their music all the time, but I didn't enjoy their Bond songs, and it's weird
Yeah.
that kind of happened like that. And then actually, I do like Billie Eilish's "No Time to Die." I surprisingly like her music, but I know I see you shaking your head. I do like the song. Now, the movie itself, I've actually still only seen this once in theaters. I have the 4K, but I haven't watched it since. And I think you've said that this is your least favorite Bond film.
This is the worst Bond film of all time. But the first thing I want to say is, I just want to say the Sam Smith song for Spectre, didn't particularly like it, but there's an official Bond concert that tours that they do London. They're coming to Belfast later this year, and I've nobody to go with. I would make go to see them, but they do a version of The Writings on the Wall, and the male singer that sings it is outstanding. It's better than Sam Smith's version. It is unreal. It's on YouTube. You can look it up.
I'm not even have to watch that.
He is unbelievable. It's usually they have a big band behind them. They have guys on guitars and they play all the Bond songs and they play like some of the score and stuff like this. Depending if it's an anniversary year, they'll do a suite, And they're coming to Belfast this year, and I would love to go and see them. I've watched the concerts on YouTube. You can watch it. I've watched it many times, or I've had it on when I'm walking the dog or I'm cleaning. And I think the woman singer, she usually sings The Writings on the Wall, but she was sick. She couldn't sing it in this performance. So he came out and he stood in, and he was out of his world. He actually got a stamp ovation. I love his version. It's made me appreciate the song tenfold. So, but Billie Eilish's, I remember when I was sitting in work the day, because again, it's a big announcement when the Bond song's coming on. And I remember sitting and working, and it was like, we're going to play the Bond song now on the radio. And all I could hear coming from the radio was, what the fuck is that?
You sound like Willie from Free Willy when you do that.
Hate it. Absolutely hate it. And what I will say is, yes, this is the worst Bond movie for me. I've watched it once. I think the plot is weak. I think it's stupid. I hate that he died at the end. I think it's one of the worst decisions ever made in movie history. You're saying about Bond being a drinker and being vulnerable. He's a loser in this movie. Everybody dies. Felix dies. His girl dies. Not his girl. He's visiting the grave from Vespa, isn't he, at the start? Sorry, he has a kid as well?
Yeah,
he
he's
has
got
a
a
kid
kid
that he
now.
doesn't know about. It's ridiculous. It's just, and there he is making breakfast for the kid and all. I don't see Bond making breakfast for his kid. I want to see him out there kicking ass. So I'm sorry that this has kind of turned negative towards the end of this this podcast, but I absolutely hate this movie.
Yeah, no, I can't really add too much to it. I like certain aspects of it. Like that was the thing. Like there was a couple of good sequences throughout. Obviously they had they thought he was dead and they had a new 007, and I thought, what's her name? She did a good job in it. And then there was the other fight sequence in the club I thought was pretty well done. But yeah, the plot is a little bit ridiculous. Rami Malek is the main villain because he was getting his big moment because of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
He's basically playing a version of like Doctor No, and it's weird. It's a strange decision, and there was a lot of strange decisions. Like, yeah, him dying was like it was a surprise, but I think that was all Daniel Craig. I think you said because he wanted to close his loop. He wanted to be an island on his own as James Bond, and
Yeah.
honestly, it makes a little bit of sense now because now the whole property is shifted over to Amazon. So it's kind of nice that he did die because like you don't want to leave that like guy up in the air. But I also could have lived without him dying.
Well, I think I told you a story, John. I have a lot of issues with this because I remember I was anticipating the next Bond movie coming out because if you get a bad Bond movie like Spectre, it doesn't necessarily mean the next one's going to be bad, right? We've seen that history showing that when we get a poor one, doesn't mean the next one's going to be poor. With, as you said, ups and downs, peaks and troughs. And I remember, like, all the hype around this at the time. They had cast the likes of Rami Malek as the villain. And I was like, well, who's he going to be? Is he going to play? Or just rumors he was going to play like Dr. No and stuff. And they just won an Oscar for Bohemian Rhapsody. And he's a likable guy. And I was like, well, what's he going to bring to this? Then they originally had Danny Boyle attached as director. And then he left the project. And the whole rumor at the time was creative differences. Then the rumor came out that we're going to kill him off. And Danny Boyle didn't want to do that. And that's where the creative differences were. I don't know how much of this is true. This is what you're hearing. But it's come out in retrospect that apparently it was Daniel Craig that wanted to kill him off. Why? I do not know. Because here is like, it's not like I've heard stories of, for example, Harrison Ford saying, I want to kill off Han Solo, right? He wanted to kill him off in The Empire Strikes Back. That's why he's frozen at the end. He didn't know if he was going to come back. Then he wanted to die at the end of Return of the Jedi, and they didn't let him. And then eventually, when he came back from The Force Awakens, they give him his wish. But that's a character that he started in 77. This is a character that's been around since the early 60s. He's part of British literature. He's been around for decades. Why does Craig think he have the right to kill him off? The people that own this franchise know there's going to be another one. So now they've backed themselves into a corner. Now, you didn't physically see him die, but how does he get out of that?
Right? Oh, he's dead. There's no way he's not dead.
Yeah. So I just thought it was pathetic. I told you a story about recently we were talking about different things, and I remember reading an article about in Rocky V where Stallone wanted to kill off Rocky, and it was in the script right up until they were shooting the movie, and then Stallone got a call one day from the studio, and they said, "We're not killing you off," and he said, "Why not?" And they says, "Because you don't kill James Bond and you don't kill Batman, so we're not killing Rocky." That's 100% right. You don't kill James Bond. Nobody wants to see that. I don't want to see that. It's a male fantasy. I want to see him beat the bad guy and get the girl. That's what I want to see. So it kind of, and then when I did see Rami Malek, I realized that he's not that good actor as I thought he was, because he played a caricature of Freddie Mercury and won an Oscar. And I don't think he's ever done anything good since. And now it's kind of like, where are we going to be now? How are we going to progress with the Bond franchise? And you're saying there about, I mean, it wraps it up because the rights then went to Amazon, but that wasn't the intention.
No.
The problem there was Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson lost control. They sold some of the rights and they lost control. They were the ones trying to, for the last load of years, Amazon's been trying to do spin-offs. They have been reluctant. They did not want to do that from what I'm led to believe. But now they've lost control. They had to hand it over in the end because they just couldn't control it no more. The franchise is too big. And now we're in limbo. How did they bring him back? Is he dead? That was part of the problem for rebooting it in the first place. They should never have rebooted it. They should have just continued it. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. Me personally, I want them to go back to a more fun Bond. I want them to go not camp, but fun, not as serious. I want them to go back to is more womanizing kind of Bond, going on missions, taking out the bad guy. I want an eccentric bad guy. But I think one thing that we're missing here is that Bond isn't supposed to be this squeaky white, clean guy. You know what I mean? He's supposed to be an anti-hero. He's supposed to be he's supposed to be a chauvinist. You know what I mean? He's supposed to take advantage to get the job done. And that's what I want to see again. I feel as if during the Craig era, because as you say, they're trying to live up to what's popular at the time. They were eroding the character of Bond.
Yeah, I agree. And it does look like, they already signed a director for the next one, and that's Denis Villeneuve, who I like. I don't know how many of his films you watch, and I can't imagine him making it a little bit more lighthearted just because of the director he is. He makes a lot of serious films. He's done the 2 Dune movies recently. He did Blade Runner 2049. He did Arrival. He did Sicario. So like these are the kind of movies like that he makes. So I think we might be more in line with like the Craig era. I have heard rumors that it might go back to the 60s because it's like that's where Bond operated best, was during like the Cold War era.
Yeah.
So I'm curious because when you get a big name director like that, like maybe they're coming in with their own vision. It also just feels like Amazon throwing money around, and it scares me that when a corporation takes control of a franchise like this, like they're gonna do spin-offs, I'm sure, just because it's like when I know you don't watch wrestling, but WWE was taken over by the same company that owns UFC. And ever since then, it's just felt very corporatized. And the people who are creating everything now feel like out of touch with what it always was. And I'm just very afraid that that's something that's going to happen to James Bond.
Yeah. I'm skeptical that that was the first thought came to my mind when Amazon got the rights and they've killed Bond off and how they're going to bring him back. My first thought was, well, set it in the 60s. Do you know what I mean? I think that was my first thought. I think a lot of people had that thought. But at the same time, I just can't see them doing that because you're making a period piece and that costs a lot more.
Yeah, but they're fucking Amazon.
I know, but still, they still have to work within budgets, don't they? Because they've got to weigh up how much it's going to cost, how much they're going to make. Doesn't matter who you are, they're still going to weigh up budgets. But my idea would be, I don't know if I told you this before, my idea would be offer someone a 4-picture deal, make 4 movies, right? With the same actor playing Bond, but make one, as you say, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, and have it reflecting that era of Bond movies that came out. So you can have your awesome. So you could have your real kind of like spy thriller in the 60s, like right, and then you could have your kind of Carry On in the 70s. Then you could have your kind of 80s, kind of like nostalgia driven one, and then you could have your 90s one, but have the same actor and age him up to look 10 years older or whatever it was for each movie. And that could be your Bond era for that actor going through the years. But I don't know. I haven't seen or heard much about Bond recently. I've heard a few actors being thrown about, but excuse me. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, I'm obviously will be interested in what they do, but it's just like there's always the fear there when these things kind of happen, like how's it gonna go? Because this was a franchise that always had the same control, and you don't want to see it like just kind of like again with wrestling, like Vince McMahon always had WWE, and you always kind of felt like, yeah, even when they were lows, like at least you had the same creative mindset in front, that kind of could see the future of what this is going to be. Now the future is completely unknown, and I don't know where it's going to go from here. I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. I'll definitely be seeing it. I enjoyed Denis Villeneuve's work, so if he's going to be in charge of the first film, I hope they give him creative control to do as he wants and has a vision for it. And we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, listen, I'm excited for it. I'm just being to be honest with you, quietly optimistic. I'm not that kind of like involved where I'm like, oh, it has to be this way, it has to be that way. If they set it in modern era, I'm not even too fussed about who they're going to cast. I mean, I seen something yesterday that they're looking at some Australian fella who's in his late 20s, and there's been a bit of a backlash online from the real hardcore Bond fans because they believe Bond should be in his 30s, because that's the age he was in the novels. So, I mean, no matter what they do, they're not going to please everybody, but that doesn't even bother me as long as they make a good movie. But I understand the frustration because I do feel as if Bond shouldn't be young to the point where he seems naive about the world around him. He has to have a wee bit of experience behind him.
He's got to have some miles on him. But, when they cast the guy, it's like, how long do we know before they actually go into production of these movies and how he'll actually be aged in the film? I've learned to like not really get too upset over casting anymore, just because we've seen that that's all just speculative, like we said with like Daniel Craig or Michael Keaton or Heath Ledger. Like we got to trust that they'll figure that out as long as that they fit their vision.
Yeah, exactly. So I say, look, the main thing is, John, this franchise is still going, even though look, I know people that actually I was quite harsh on No Time to Die. I just couldn't get my head around the way it went. The problem. I have every Bond movie on Blu-ray apart from that one.
Really?
And yes, and you know, there's times I'm like, maybe I'll pick it up for cheap just because I've got the rest. But like, I just I'll maybe visit it at some stage again. But at the minute, I'm like, oh, do I really want to waste my time watching that? And that's how I feel about it. But I know I've heard people that actually don't mind No Time to Die. Uh, but one thing about Bond is it's still alive, it's still kicking, it's still got a big fan base, and with it moving in the other hands, they are going to produce something. It's too much of a gold mine, so we just have to wait and see what happens, see what's around the corner.
Yep, and that's all we can do going forward. But I enjoyed our conversation today here on James Bond. I hope you did as well, buddy.
Yeah, I did. I did. I thought it was very good.
Yeah, and I think we
I, ho-
already
I,
have.
hope, I hope we've had a brief overview of everything. You know.
I think we covered all our ground on this. Maybe a little bit of a longer Axis episode, but still, it's a whole franchise that's very hard to fit into an hour. So it's we wanted to get it all in and talk about the future, the past, and where we're going, David. And speaking of which, what are we doing next on Axis Cinema Appreciation?
Next on Axis, John, we're going to be visiting Toontown, I believe. Isn't that right? Are we going to Roger Rabbit?
We are. We're going to Who
Yes.
Framed Roger Rabbit, Robert
Yeah.
Zemeckis classic from the 1980s.
Uh-huh. Such a great movie. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to doing that one.
Yeah, so this time we go from covering 27 films to just covering one again. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so as always, we would appreciate if you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video. Also, guys, the regular main show now, we just started it at the time of this recording, but if you want to look for us on Spotify, search Let's Talk Movies Podcast with John and David, and you can find us on there, right, David?
Yeah, that's right. So we've just recently started that up, and
So-
we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah, it's very early on. It's in the primitive days, but if you are looking to just listen to the audio of our main show, you can find it over there as well. So, just want to get as much information out to you guys as possible.
Yeah, so basically one show a week's going to be dropping there. So we'll start with our newer episodes, and then we're going to go back to season 3. So if anybody hasn't listened to season 3 yet, they'll be dropping once a week, and maybe you can give them a listen to over the summer.
Yeah, we got a lot of work that we're proud of in there. And, of course, all the older videos are also available on this YouTube channel. So take a look at all the playlists that David set up. He puts a lot of work into that, and I appreciate that. So,
Yeah, and we've a lot of Bond stuff in there too.
we did. Like we said at the beginning, it's the origins of this entire project. So we always hope you enjoy this. And if you did, make sure you guys get out in the streets and tell your friends about us. And, we'll see you guys on the next time around.